Welcome to the deep dive. Quick question for you. When you think about online gambling crossing paths with crypto, how big do you imagine that world actually is?
hmm
Whatever number you have in mind, well, our sources suggest it's probably much, much bigger. It's operating right at this intersection of, explosive growth, cutting-edge tech, and some really complex regulations.
It really is. It's a convergence that seems driven by both, well, intense user demand and just rapid technological innovation. We've pulled together a stack of sources for this deep dive, market reports, research briefs, articles basically, to really understand what's happening here straight from the material you shared.
That's right. So our mission today is to unpack what these sources are telling us about, first, the sheer size of this market, then what's the engine behind its incredibly fast growth. What are the benefits and maybe the potential pitfalls for both the players and the operators? And, where might all of this be heading?
And prepare for some pretty eye-opening numbers. You might be surprised just how large this industry already is, and also how technologies like blockchain are fundamentally changing ideas around, well, trust and privacy in gaming.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So before we dive straight into the numbers, maybe we should just clarify what we mean by online gambling here. Like, what are the sources generally including in that term?
Yeah, good point. Generally, they're talking about the usual suspects, sports betting, casino games like slots and blackjack, poker, bingo. But the key difference is it's all accessed online through the internet.
Right.
The delivery mechanism is online, and then there's this new layer of technology being put on top.
Got it. So the standard stuff, just online. And what really makes this a deep dive topic is how it's colliding with these newer technologies, specifically blockchain and cryptocurrency. What do the sources say are the absolute must-know basics about those for this discussion?
Absolutely. So think of blockchain. Simply, it's basically a decentralized, public, globally distributed ledger, a digital record book, if you like.
Okay.
And it's a tamper-proof way to record transactions using cryptography.
So tamper-proof meaning it's not held by just one bank or one company, and you can't just go in and change it later.
Exactly. Our sources often use that classic example, Joe paying Sue.
Mm.
When Joe sends Sue money using blockchain, that transaction gets automatically and crucially securely recorded on this distributed ledger. And everyone on the network can see it if they look. It's transparent, it's secured by crypto math, meaning neither Joe nor Sue can realistically dispute it or change the record later.
And a crucial point here, the sources emphasize, is there's no intermediary, right? Like no bank in the middle verifying things.
Precisely. The blockchain itself handles the verification and the recording. It automatically checks if Joe actually has the funds to send, preventing that old problem of double spending.
Okay.
It basically removes the need for a single trusted third party because the trust is kind of built into the system's architecture itself. Distributed trust.
Right. Distributed trust. Okay. And then cryptocurrency. That's the actual digital money using this blockchain tech. Things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, or those stable coins like USDT and USDC.
Correct. These are decentralized digital currencies. No single bank or government issues them. And the sources highlight several pretty compelling benefits of using crypto for transactions, especially in this gambling context.
Like what?
Well, often very low or even zero transaction fees. Also, really rapid transaction times. We're talking near instant for deposits and withdrawals, often 247.
Yeah, speed is a massive deal in online gaming. Nobody wants to wait days to get their winnings out.
It really is. Another point is a very low risk of payment fraud because, well, once a transaction is confirmed on the blockchain, it's essentially irreversible. And notably, there's the potential for greater anonymity or at least, a reduced need for providing extensive personal ID. Transactions are often tied just to wallet addresses, not your name and address, especially on what some sources call these no verification crypto casinos.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and frankly a bit eye-popping. The growth story. The numbers our sources present are, well, they're pretty staggering.
They really are. Let's look at the data points. Even just looking regionally, like the Asia-Pacific online gambling market, that was valued at nearly 40 billion US dollars in 2024.
40 billion just for Asia Pacific.
Yeah, and it's projected to more than double to USD 89 billion by 2032. That's growing at a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR, of over 10%. That's pretty solid growth just for one region.
Okay, solid. But the broader crypto gambling industry globally, that must be where the really big numbers are.
That is absolutely where you see the truly explosive figures. The
Yeah.
sources we looked at report it generated a staggering $81.4 billion in gross gaming revenue GGR in 2024 alone.
81.4 billion. Wow. Just wow. I mean, that puts it firmly into serious global industry territory.
Absolutely. And the pace of growth is what's truly incredible, that GGR figure. It represents something like a five-fold increase compared to just 2 years prior, back in 2022.
Five-fold growth.
Yeah.
In 2 years. That's just hard to grasp.
Yeah.
How quickly are things moving right now? What's the latest feel?
Well, according to data cited from April 2025, these crypto gambling sites are handling over $8 billion in monthly wagers, just monthly.
Billion a month.
And the total bets using digital currency reportedly reached over $26 billion in the first quarter of 2025 alone. That's nearly double what it was in Q1 of 2024.
So this isn't just some marginal trend. It's like a tidal wave completely defying traditional market trajectories. And what's really striking, as the sources point out repeatedly, is that this is all happening despite widespread bans and restrictions in major markets, the US, the EU, China, the UK.
That's such a critical insight from the reports. The decentralized nature of crypto and the technical workarounds used by operators and users, they seem to be pretty effective bypasses for traditional geographic and financial regulatory controls.
Yeah.
It really highlights how challenging censorship and restrictions are in this new digital landscape.
It also speaks to the sheer scale we're talking about. Tens of thousands of individual crypto casino platforms operating globally, serving, tens of millions of users.
Exactly. And while, sure, early adopters might have included tech insiders, the sources are clear. The growth now is increasingly driven by younger gamblers who are just more comfortable with digital money. Also, casual gamers drawn in by specific features, and players in regions may be looking for alternative payment methods or just ways to access these games.
Okay, so given that enormous scale and just how fast it's being adopted,
Yeah.
it really begs the question, why? Why is this happening? What's the core appeal driving tens of millions of users to these platforms? Let's dive into the benefits that tech enables.
Yeah, okay. The sources highlight several key appeals. First, enhanced security and transparency. Like we discussed, that blockchain ledger is tamper-proof, it's immutable, every transaction is recorded securely and often publicly.
And they talk a lot about provably fair gaming. That sounds like a really big deal in this space.
Oh, it is. It's a major draw and a significant differentiator from traditional online casinos. Crypto casinos use cryptographic methods, things like hash functions, and often public smart contracts. This allows players to independently verify that the outcome of a game...
Like every spin, every roll.
Exactly. Every spin of the slot, every roll of the dice, every shuffle of the cards, that it was genuinely random and wasn't manipulated by the house. You don't just have to trust the operator's black box algorithm. You can actually verify its fairness yourself using the math.
Wow. That directly addresses a huge historical friction point, right? That source of distrust in online gambling. You're saying you can actually prove the game wasn't rigged against you.
Exactly. The technology makes it possible for platforms to offer that level of verifiable trust. And smart contracts are key here too. Remember those? They're like self-executing agreements coded onto the blockchain.
Right.
They automatically handle things like game outcomes, payouts, betting settlements, all based on predefined rules coded directly into the contract itself.
So if you win, the payout happens.
Yeah.
Automatically and instantly, according to the TUD. No waiting for the casino's finance department to approve it or process it.
Precisely. It removes the need to trust that central operator for timely payment. The code handles it. And the sources also note this automation, removing intermediaries, can lead to significant operational cost savings for the platforms, potentially up to 40% in the future, one source estimated.
Okay, another huge appeal you mentioned earlier was anonymity and privacy. How does that play out?
Yeah, this is a big driver for many users on some platforms, maybe many. Players don't need to provide extensive personal information, full name, government ID, bank card details. A crypto wallet address might be all that's required on some of these no-verification crypto casinos.
Which protects privacy, obviously, and reduces the risk of identity theft. But it also, as you said, allows access for players in regions where online gambling is restricted, lets them keep their activities discreet. This must link back to why it's growing despite bans.
Absolutely. But what's fascinating here, and the sources point this out, is the nuance. While transactions are tied to these pseudonymous wallet IDs, not personal identities directly, those wallet IDs are on a public ledger.
Right, traceable to an extent.
Exactly. And reputable crypto wallets, the places you get the wallets from, often still require identification for regulatory reasons. Anti-money laundering, AML, know your customer KYC procedures. So it's maybe not perfect anonymity in all cases, but it's often a much higher degree of privacy than traditional online gambling methods. And crucially, it bypasses those traditional financial trails.
Efficiency and accessibility are also major factors mentioned, aren't they?
Definitely. Transaction speed is just a huge benefit. We're talking near instant deposits and withdrawals available 247 globally. No more waiting days for bank transfers or dealing with banking hours.
And lower costs, too.
Yes, because it's often peer-to-peer. Without those traditional payment processors taking a cut, transaction fees can be minimal, sometimes non-existent. That's beneficial for everyone, but especially maybe for high rollers moving larger sums.
And it opens the door for players in places without, say, well-developed banking systems, or those facing strict financial controls.
Exactly. Anyone with an internet connection and some cryptocurrency can potentially participate. It provides access where traditional systems might fail or actively restrict them. And our sources really emphasize that stablecoins like USDT or USDC have been a game changer here.
How so?
Well, they peg their value to something like the US dollar, so they drastically reduce that wild volatility risk you get with Bitcoin or Ether. This makes crypto gambling feel much more approachable and, frankly, less intimidating for casual players.
Makes sense. You know what your money's worth day to day.
Right. And the numbers back it up. Nearly 60% of crypto wagers in 2025 use stablecoins, according to one report. That tells you just how important that stability factor is for adoption.
Okay, moving beyond those core benefits, the sources detail some really interesting new trends and innovations emerging in this space, particularly around the convergence with decentralized finance, or DeFi. What's happening there?
Yeah, that DeFi convergence is creating entirely new models, really blurring the lines. Players aren't just gambling anymore. They can engage in things like yield farming or provide liquidity by staking their crypto assets in pools connected to the gambling platform.
Taking their crypto, so they lock it up with the platform. And what do they get for doing that? They're taking some risk, right?
They are. In return, they can earn rewards, maybe additional tokens issued by the platform or a direct share of the platform's revenue. This leads directly to this kind of radical concept where players can effectively become partial house owners or shareholders.
Oh, yeah.
By staking their tokens, providing liquidity for the games, they get to share in the platform's profits. Sometimes this is formalized through loyalty programs based on how many tokens they hold and stake.
That's a massive shift from the traditional setup where the house always wins and the player just plays. Here, players can earn passively just by supporting the platform's ecosystem.
It really is. It blurs those lines between player and owner, gambler and investor. And blockchain and smart contracts are also enabling truly decentralized betting platforms. Think peer-to-peer betting.
Like directly between players. No central bookie.
Exactly. Players bet directly against each other. The smart contract holds the stakes and pays the winner. This removes the centralized operator who would normally take a cut or set all the odds. It fosters a more open, kind of community-centric ecosystem. Some sources are calling this GambleFi.
GambleFi, okay. What about other emerging technologies the sources flag? Things like VR, better encryption, mobile dominance.
Yeah, the sources predict pretty significant growth in all those areas. VR casinos are expected to become more common, offering much more immersive, almost physical feeling gambling experiences online. Platforms might move towards what one source called next-level encryption by 2027, trying to stay ahead of future security threats. Mobile gaming is predicted to just absolutely dominate, maybe around 80% of all crypto gaming activity happening on phones by 2026, which just reflects broader mobile usage trends.
Makes sense.
And also, cross-chain interoperability is getting better. That means making it easier to use various different cryptocurrencies across different blockchains on the same platform. More choice for users.
And then there's something called zero-knowledge proofs, or ZKPs.
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly technical. Can you break that down simply?
It does sound complex, yeah, but the core idea is actually quite powerful, especially for privacy and trust. Think of the Where's Waldo analogy some sources use. You can prove you found Waldo by, say, cutting a tiny hole in a large piece of paper placed over the picture, showing only Waldo through the hole.
Oh, okay.
You prove you know where he is without revealing the whole picture or the underlying information to the person verifying.
Okay, so you prove something is true without actually revealing the sensitive data itself.
Precisely. And the sources suggest ZKPs have some really exciting potential applications in gaming. They could enable much enhanced privacy, maybe transactions that are completely anonymized, even on a public ledger, which is a big step beyond current pseudonymity. They could also provide even stronger guarantees of verifiable randomness for things like game outcomes or loot boxes, potentially building on that provably fair idea, and maybe even enable totally new gameplay mechanics involving hidden information or truly trustless collaboration between players. Still early days, but a lot of potential.
And NFTs are also blurring lines here too, according to our sources. Non-fungible tokens.
Yes, exactly. NFTs function as verifiable proof of digital asset ownership recorded on a blockchain. In gaming, this enables things like play-to-earn models, where players can genuinely own their in-game items, swords, skins, land as NFTs, and potentially trade or sell them on open markets.
So gaming meets collectibles meets finance.
Pretty much. While that's exciting for users who want real digital ownership, the sources do note this significantly blurs the lines between traditional gaming, outright gambling, and financial investment. And they point out this trend is partly driven by, well, the interests of capital looking for new digital avenues, which, they caution, can sometimes create climates of distrust or even exploitation, particularly in some of the early, less regulated NFT-driven games.
Right. This raises a really important question then. With all this incredible growth and boundary-pushing innovation, what are the significant challenges and risks that are outlined in the sources? It can't all be smooth sailing.
No, definitely not. There are significant hurdles. Regulatory headaches are probably the most prominent and complex challenge. That decentralized, pseudonymous nature of crypto gambling makes it inherently difficult for governments and traditional regulatory bodies to control, prohibit, or regulate effectively.
These sites are censorship resistant, as one source put it.
Exactly, which again is part of the appeal for users and operators trying to bypass local restrictions. But from a government or regulatory perspective, it creates huge uncertainty and, frankly, concern. There's a fundamental lack of clear, consistent international regulation for the space.
So governments are pushing back.
Oh, yes. Governments are definitely increasing scrutiny globally. They might try to implement technical restrictions like blocking websites or target the payment processors that act as bridges between the crypto world and traditional finance, or even pursue direct legal action against operators or maybe even users.
And this is why operators often base themselves in jurisdictions with more, let's say, favorable regulations. Places like Curacao or Malta come up a lot.
Precisely. They seek regulatory havens, essentially.
Okay, beyond regulation, what about security risks? We talked about blockchain being secure, but is everything built on it safe?
That's a key distinction. The underlying blockchain itself is incredibly secure against tampering. But the platforms built on top of it, and critically, the wallets where users store their crypto, those are not immune to threats at all.
So, scams.
Yes, not all platforms are legitimate. The relative ease of setting up a basic crypto casino site can unfortunately attract malicious actors running outright fraudulent operations or rug pull scams where they just disappear with users' funds. And crypto theft itself is a very real, very significant threat. The sources report over, get this, $1.49 billion worth of crypto was stolen in nearly 300 separate incidents in 2024 alone.
Wow, 1.5 billion stolen. That's a huge risk. What about cold wallet storage? That's mentioned as a high security measure people should use.
Yeah, cold wallet storage means keeping your crypto completely offline, disconnected from the internet, usually on a specialized hardware device. This offers very strong protection against online hacking attempts and often requires extra security like multi-signature authentication for withdrawals.
Sounds good, but what's the downside?
Well, the sources note the disadvantages. It introduces delays if you need to quickly access your funds for betting or withdrawal as you have to connect it. And there's the significant risk of permanent loss if you lose the physical wallet device or its crucial recovery phrase. It's a definite trade-off between maximum security and day-to-day accessibility and convenience.
You mentioned anonymity and privacy as a benefit earlier, but the sources also discuss a potential darker side to this anonymity.
Yes, they do. While it's beneficial for user privacy in many ways, that same lack of traditional personal identification can make resolving disputes quite difficult. If something goes wrong between a player and a platform, there might be insufficient documentation to prove your case.
Okay.
More significantly, though, our sources report concerns raised by various authorities that this anonymity can potentially be exploited for illicit finance.
Can you elaborate on what the sources specifically say about that? What kind of concerns?
Specifically, they report on practices like offsetting and multiplier betting betting, sometimes used within the traditional high roller junket industry, particularly highlighted in reports focusing on the Asia-Pacific region. The concern is that similar techniques, facilitated by crypto speed and pseudonymity, are being used to move money connected to serious crimes like drug trafficking or cybercrime, and also simply to evade financial controls or tax levies. The reports state that authorities are quite concerned about what they see as inadequacies in anti-money laundering AML and customer due diligence CDD policy implementation and enforcement within parts of this rapidly growing crypto gambling sector.
So just to be clear, the technology itself isn't inherently designed for illicit use, but its features speed, cross-border nature, anonymity can be leveraged by criminal elements, and its design makes traditional financial oversight much harder.
That's essentially what the sources suggest the authorities are worried about, yes. That the very features designed for freedom, privacy, and efficiency also make it harder to track illicit financial flows compared to the traditional regulated banking system. Anonymity also makes implementing traditional responsible gambling strategies very challenging.
How so?
Things like self-exclusion lists usually rely on identifying the user, or collecting data to spot patterns of problem gambling becomes much harder if users are pseudonymous and don't have formal accounts in the traditional sense.
Right. And of course, there are the purely financial risks related to the crypto itself.
Absolutely. Cryptocurrency volatility is a big one. The value of Bitcoin, Ether, or other altcoins can fluctuate wildly, sometimes very quickly. This means your winnings could be worth significantly less in dollar terms by the time you cash out, or the value of the funds you deposited could drop unexpectedly while you're playing.
That adds a whole other layer of risk.
It does. And related to that, players might also find themselves spending more than they intended because, psychologically, they might not associate the abstract, virtual value of crypto with real money in the same way they do with their local fiat currency. It can feel a bit like playing with points or tokens.
And the speculation angle adds yet another layer of risk on top of that.
Exactly. Some people might be drawn in not just by the gambling aspect, but by the hope or speculation that the value of the specific cryptocurrency they're using will go up significantly. So they're essentially gambling on the currency as well as gambling with the currency. Double risk.
Finally, there's just the basic complexity and usability, especially for people new to crypto.
Yes, definitely. There's still a learning curve involved compared to traditional online payments. Understanding crypto wallets, transaction fees, gas fees, different blockchain networks, ensuring you send to the right address. Navigating these platforms isn't always as straightforward as just entering a credit card number.
Yeah.
And implementing those really advanced features we talked about, like zero-knowledge proofs, presents significant technical challenges for the operators themselves. They can be computationally expensive, require specialized developer expertise, and need careful design to ensure they don't create friction or slow things down for the end user.
Okay, so wrapping this all up and looking ahead, what does the future hold for this, well, booming and complex market, according to the sources we looked at?
Well, the overwhelming consensus in the sources is continued explosive growth. Some project the overall market size could potentially triple in valuation by 2028. That's just a few years away.
Triple. Wow. As it gets that large, you'd expect the established traditional gaming giants to start taking notice, right?
Absolutely. Expect to see more established players starting to buy into the space, acquiring successful crypto platforms, or launching their own crypto-enabled offerings. It's likely becoming too big and, frankly, too lucrative for them to ignore anymore.
Makes sense. And technologically.
Continued tech advancements are pretty much a given across the board. More sophisticated VR experiences, better encryption methods, mobile gaming absolutely dominating usage, and likely less reliance specifically just on Bitcoin as stablecoins and other versatile altcoins gain even further traction and user acceptance.
But that regulatory pressure you discussed earlier, that's not going away, is it?
Far from it. Regulatory efforts will likely intensify globally. This might force platforms to adapt significantly. Perhaps we'll see more seeking licenses and more established jurisdictions, maybe implementing stricter KYC and AML procedures, even if reluctantly to address those concerns raised by authorities we discussed. Or perhaps developing new compliance technologies themselves.
So a balancing act.
Yeah, the sources suggest the future will likely involve this complex, ongoing dance between the technological freedom and innovation that's driving the growth and the evolving efforts by governments and international bodies to impose some level of control, manage the inherent risks, and protect consumers. Clearer international guidelines will probably be necessary for the sector to truly mature and potentially integrate more smoothly with the traditional financial world.
Okay, so let's try and recap this incredible journey we've taken into the intersection of online gambling and crypto. We've definitely seen a market sector experiencing just phenomenal, almost unbelievable growth, and it's largely fueled by blockchain technology's core benefits. Things like enhanced security through concepts like provably fair gaming, that incredible transaction speed, the transparency of the ledger, and a significant degree of user privacy.
Right, and this tech is enabling some really fascinating innovations too, like genuine peer-to-peer betting, removing the middleman, and even giving players a direct stake in the platforms they use through that DeFi convergence, becoming part owners.
But, as we covered, we've also seen that this rapid transformation doesn't come without some pretty significant challenges. Those regulatory hurdles, driven by the technology's censorship-resistant nature, are huge. The potential for illicit use, enabled by anonymity, which authorities are clearly concerned about, according to our sources, that's a major issue.
hmm And then there's the inherent volatility of the cryptocurrencies themselves, the financial risks for players, and the real difficulties in implementing traditional responsible gambling measures effectively in this pseudonymous environment. All major concerns raised repeatedly in the material.
So it really feels like a constant dance, doesn't it? Between this powerful technological innovation, pushing boundaries forward at lightning speed, and the regulatory and societal efforts that are kind of scrambling to catch up, manage the risks, and just understand the full implications.
Precisely. It's a dynamic tension.
So maybe if we connect this to the bigger picture for a final thought. These technologies, blockchain, crypto, NFTs, ZKPs, they aren't just changing online gambling, are they? They seem to be fundamentally reshaping some core ideas. Ideas about digital ownership, what it means to truly own something online via NFTs, how trust operates in online interactions, moving away from intermediaries towards code and consensus via blockchain and smart contracts, what privacy even means in our hyper-connected world, and of course those increasingly blurred lines between entertainment, social interaction, and financial activity in the digital age.
That's a great point.
So maybe consider this. How might these concepts being proven out and scaled incredibly rapidly in a fast-moving, high-stakes sector like crypto gambling, how might they ripple outwards and apply far beyond the realm of online casinos in the years to come? What other industries might be transformed?